Chapter 2 Unforgettable Huadian, which has the parts Hwasong Yusik School, Disillusionment, and the Down with Imperialism Union. If you're not familiar with this work, this is called Kim Il Sung's With the Century, and this is Kim Il Sung's life story. Not just his life story, but his family as well. Um, Last chapter we left off essentially just as Kim Il Sung's father passed away. And here he left a little bit of a poem from Ki Kwan Rin, heroine of the Independence Army. My mind turning towards a new theater of activity. From July to December 1926. Part 1. Hwasong Yusik School. After my father's funeral, his friends stayed in Fusang for a few days to discuss my future. It was mid-June of 1926 that I left for Hwasong Yusik School at their recommendation. That was immediately after the June 10th independence movement in our country. This movement was a mass anti-Japanese demonstration organized by communists who has recently appeared in the arena of the national liberation struggle following the March 1st popular uprising. As is well known, the March 1st popular uprising was a turning point in the national liberation struggle of our country, in its shift from a nationalist to a communist movement. Among the forerunners, who realized through the March 1st popular uprising that bourgeois nationalism could no longer be the banner of national liberation struggle, the trend to follow the current of thought rapidly increased. And through their activities, Marxism-Leninism spread quickly. In the year after the March 1st popular uprising, a working class organization called the Labor Mutual Aid Association appeared in Seoul. And following this, mass organizations such as peasant organizations, youth organizations, and women's organizations came into being one after the other. Under the guidance of such organizations, an energetic mass struggle got underway in our country from the beginning of the 1920s to defend the rights and interests of the proletarian masses and oppose the colonial policy of the Japanese imperialists. In 1921, the dockers of Pusan went out on general strike. Following this, successive workers' strikes broke out in such industrial centers as Seoul, Pyongyang, and Incheon, as well as in many provinces. Under the influence of the working class movement, tenant disputes against Japanese landowners and vicious Korean landlords swept the Namuri Plain in Jaerung and Amthae Island. Also, students went on strike in many places in opposition to the colonial slave education and in demand of academic freedom. By replacing their saber rule with the silk cloak of silver government and drawing some pro-Japanese elements into the advisory council, the Japanese imperialists pretended to encourage the participation of Koreans in politics. At the same time, under the specious lie of promoting the expression of public opinion, they permitted the publication of some Korean newspapers and magazines, and made a fuss as if an era of prosperity had come. However, our struggle would not tolerate such trickery and continued its struggle against the aggressors. Oh God. Julia's here, chat! The trend of the development of the mass movement, particularly of the working class movement, called for a powerful political force, capable of giving it unified leadership. To meet this historic demand, The Korean Communist Party was founded in Seoul in April 1925. At that time, many political parties of the working class were appearing in a number of European countries too. The Korean Communist Party did not fulfill its role effectively as the vanguard of the working class because of some essential limitations. Its lack of a guiding ideology that confronted with the actual situation, and its failure to achieve the unity of its ranks and strike deep root among the masses. However, its foundation, marking as it did an important event that demonstrated the change of the old current of thought to a new one, and the qualitative change in the national liberation struggle gave impetus to the development of the mass movement, particularly the labor movement, the peasant movement, and the youth movement, as well as the national liberation movement. The communists started to prepare for a fresh anti-Japanese demonstration on a nationwide scale. It was around this time that Sejong, the last king of the Ri dynasty, died. His death stimulated the anti-Japanese feelings of the Korean nation. At the news of the king's death, Koreans, irrespective of age and sex, wept loudly in the mourning. Even though the country had been ruined, Sejong, the last king, symbolized the Ri dynasty. However, now that he was dead, Koreans' pent-up sorrow for the ruined country again burst out. The following song, sung by some students to the band music, added grief of the mourners. Farewell for you, Changdong Palace, forever and ever. Go I shall to my grave, to a place forlorn. Now that I'm leaving you, when shall I come again? May the 20 million Korean people thrive. Their wailing was a great irritation to the Japanese occupationists. Wherever Koreans gathered in crowds to mourn, Japanese mounted police immediately moved in and dispersed them, with clubs and by force of arms. Even pupils from elementary schools were clubbed mercilessly. What the Japanese desired was that Koreans should not grieve over the ruin of their country, and should shut their mouths, without weeping over the death of their king. This was the true nature of the rule by the Governor General, who disguised his saber rule with the civil government. The enemy's outrageous repression of our people added fuel to their burning anti-Japanese feelings. Taking advantage of the anti-Japanese spirit of the popular masses, the communists planned a nationwide anti-Japanese demonstration on the day of the funeral of Sejong, and secretly pushed ahead with preparations for it. Absolutely, Julia. I will ping you. However, the secret was betrayed to the Japanese imperialists by factionalists who had found their way into the preparatory committee for the demonstration. The preparations for the anti-Japanese demonstrations were ruthlessly suppressed. However, patriotic people did not discontinue the preparations. On June 10th, when the bier of Sejong was passing through the streets, tens of thousands of Seoul citizens launched a mass demonstration shouting, "Long live the independence of Korea! Japanese troops, get out!" and "Fighters for the Korean independence, unite!" Their grudges and anger pent up during the 7 years of civil government burst out at last in an outcry of hurrah for independence. Even pupils from the elementary school, who were only 12 years of age, joined the demonstration. The demonstrators grappled courageously with the enemy's armed soldiers and policemen. On June 10th, independence movement failed to overcome the ruthless suppression of the Japanese imperialists because of the machinations of the factionalists. If the bourgeois nationalists' worship of the great powers was a basic reason for the failure of the March 1st popular uprising, The factional activities of the early communists were the root cause that ruined the June 10th independence movement. In leading this struggle, the Tuesday group worked from their factionless point of view, whereas the Seoul group resorted to obstructive moves to oppose them. After the June 10th independence movement, most of the principal figures of the leadership body of the Korean Communist Party were arrested. LA Beast will now forever live within you. There we go. You had the pre-LA Beast chapter of your life, and now you're in the post-LA Beast chapter of your life. Congratulations. Or I'm sorry. Whichever is applicable. After the June 10th independence movement, most of the principal figures in the leadership body of the Korean Communist Party were arrested. As a result of the June 10th independence movement, the deceitfulness and the craftiness of the civil government were revealed to the whole world. Through this movement, our people demonstrated their indomitable will and fighting spirit to regain their country and defend their national dignity, whatever the adversity. If the communists had rid themselves of factionalism and organized and led the struggle in a unified way, the June 10th independence movement would have expanded and developed as a nationwide struggle, and a heavier blow would have been dealt to the colonial rule of the Japanese imperialists. This movement left a serious lesson that without getting rid of factions, it would be impossible to achieve either the development of the communist movement or the victory of the anti-Japanese liberation struggle. Right there. Right there. That I'm going to read that part again. Because that right there is why comrades like myself and Madeline and other people in the tank tube, I would say, will tell you that organizing with the DSA as your sole means of organizing is not the way. I'm sorry. In our opinion, in the Marxist-Leninist opinion, it's not the way. We believe that that has been scientifically disproven, in fact. And, like, even in regards to the Greens in the UK, right? The reason why the little Marxist-Leninist faction in the Green Party, I can't imagine that it means anything, is for the exact reason that factionalism can never lead to the kind of unified struggle you need. You need your party to be founded, to be centered and set up around that proper ideological line. That's the key. Right? In our opinion, you definitely you have to you have to set that up before, like, anything else. And if that means that there is no good party with an ideological line in your area, that means it's time to build one. Even if it's only starting with 2 people. That would be the communist way. Yeah, bourgeois parties have no motivation to progress society. Exactly. And working in a big tent organization that is dominated by entryists, in a sense, is much like working with trying to work as an entryist in the DNC itself, right? We have to. One thing, like, that's the. And I know it makes, like, our comrades on the left uncomfortable, but we have to talk about that aspect, because that is the thing that separates us from democratic socialists, right? We're aligned on so many different things, on all kinds of moral questions, all kinds of other fucking questions. We're aligned. The thing that separates us is our tactical and strategic differences. And the fact that we feel like the fact that we believe, Marxist-Leninists, that there is only one scientifically proven method to building socialism. And that's by building the institutions that can replace the bourgeois state after the masses become so disenfranchised and dissatisfied with it that they smash the bourgeois state. One reason why I love that our comrade Steelbot uses the word smash a lot is because that's like a key thing. We cannot take hold of the existing state organs. The first step is smashing the bourgeois state organs. But in order for us to be ready for that first step, we have to build the institutions. Look, right there. G-string, what is to be done? To be done is clear. Unite the working masses, smash imperialism, strengthen socialism under proletarian leadership, and continue the revolutionary struggle guided by Marxism, Leninism, and Juche. Build self-reliance, collectivism, and anti-imperialist solidarity. Defend socialist states and support peoples fighting imperialist aggression. Thank you, G-string. I mean, Comrade Steel. My mistake, sorry. Alright, to continue. In those days, I analyzed the result of this movement in my own way. There we go. Perfect. It's not. That's the thing about the. I mean, the thing about the DSA. Well, it's accurate about that. Even the first part is correct. Because the thing that is like the worst part about the DSA is it's not even a party. It's not a bourgeois party or a proletarian party. It's literally a funnel that just sucks people into the Democratic Party and sucks any fucking energy into the Democratic Party. That's all it is. It's just a funnel that you fall into. And all the revolutionary energy falls into it and goes into the Democratic Party and goes nowhere. At most into a temporary measure that will be rolled back next year. They're the compatible left, indeed. Alright, Kim Il-sung continues. In those days, I analyzed the result of this movement in my own way. I wondered why the organizers of this struggle had used the same peaceful method which had been applied at the time of the March 1st popular uprising. There is a saying, train soldiers for 1,000 days to use them for a day. Likewise, if one wants to send the popular masses to the battlefield once, one must educate and organize them sufficiently and train them well. However, the organizers and leaders of the June 10th independence movement sent tens of thousands of empty-handed people to confront armed soldiers and policemen, having failed to make full preparations. So it was natural that the outcome should be tragic. I could not sleep because of my indignation at the setbacks suffered by the anti-Japanese movement, each time entailing wholesale deaths. The failure of this movement made my blood run hot and made me still more firmly determined to defeat the Japanese imperialists and regain my country. With this ideological urge, I resolved to make my days at Huadian Youth School worthy of the teachings of my departed father, of the wishes of my mother, and the expectations of my people. Huadian Youth School was a 2-year military and political school belonging to Zhonggunbi. A school was founded at the beginning of 1925 with a view to training cadres for the Independence Army. Having found a way to national resurrection and building up strength, the fighters for the independence and the patriotic champions of the Enlightenment movement work hard to establish a military school to train military personnel. at the same time as founding general schools. Thanks to their efforts, many military schools were established in various parts of Manchuria. So do you see? I want you to just take stock here. Even though they were in a their movement was in disarray, it was scattered, it was disorganized, and had lots of problems. I do want you to make note that their movement was organized and had enough support to build schools and other institutions that stood outside of that puppet state of the Japanese imperialists. Just another nudge, just another what is to be done, another bringing home of that what is to be done. Among them were Xingxing Training School, Shiliping Military Academy, Shangshehei Training School, and Huaseng Usik School in Huadian County. Such leaders of the independence movement as Rang Ki-thak, Ri Si-jung, Oh Tung-jin, Ri Pum-suk, Kim Yuk-sik, and Kim Chua-jin played a central role in the establishment of these military schools. But you're already gay. You can always get hey, you can always try and get gayer, is all I'm saying. Don't disparage Virgo from trying to get even gayer. I think that would be a mistake. Those admitted to Hwasong Usik School were servicemen on active duty, selected from companies under Zhang Wenbu. The candidates from different companies were allotted by the higher authorities, and they were selected from among the best soldiers. When they had finished the 2-year course, new ranks were conferred on them according to merit, and they were returned to the companies they had come from. Outside the Independence Army, some young people entered this school on the recommendation of individuals. Such cases, however, were rare. So young people with a noble will and who were in the prime of their life wanted to go to this school. Now there remain very few of my fellow students from Hwasong Usik School who can look back upon those days. When my father was alive, I worried little about my future and household affairs. After he had passed away, however, I was obliged to consider my future and to deal with many complex problems which were raised in household management. I was at my wit's end because of the sorrow and distress caused me by my death of my father. However, I pondered over my future with a single desire to devote my life to independence movement, whatever the cost, as my father had hoped, and with the ambition to go to a higher school, if the circumstances permitted it, even though it might be a burden to my mother. In this way, my father had wished that I be sent to a secondary school. However, my family was so poor that I felt I could not express my wish to go to a higher school. If I were to go back to school, my mother would have to bear a heavy burden of raising money for my school fees. However, the small amount of money raised by my mother was getting for laundry and needlework for others was not enough to pay for my education, it being spent on keeping our poor family. After my father died, my uncle Huang Guan, who had been his assistant, soon lost his job at the dispensary. There was only a small amount of medicine left at the dispensary by my father. It was at this time that my father's friends advised me to go to Hwasong Usik School. The will my father left to my mother included the matter of my going to a higher school. My father's last request addressed to my mother and uncle was to write to his friends to get their help in sending me to a higher school. My mother wrote to many people, as he had requested. My mother had to do so, although she regretted it, because the world was so cruel that it was impossible to live even for a single day without the help of kindness. So the question of my future was presented for discussion among those fighters for independence who remained in Fusang after my father's funeral. This is what O Tung-jin told me. I have sent a letter of introduction to the Yusin Ko-tako for you to go to Hwasong Yusuk School. A military education there will meet your ambition. As your father said, independence cannot be attained through argument. We will take responsibility for your future after your graduation from that school. So study all you can at school. It appeared that my father's friends wanted me to train as a reserve cadre who would succeed their generation in the future. It was good that the leaders of the Independence Army were concerned about training reserve cadres and attached importance to it. I readily agree with O Tung-jin's proposal. I was extremely grateful to the independence fighters for their kind concern about my future. Their intention to send me to a military school and train me for the independence movement conformed with my desire to devote my whole life to the cause of national liberation. My view in those days was that we could defeat the Japanese imperialists only through a military confrontation, and that one could stand in the front rank of the independence movement only when one had military knowledge. The way was open now for me to realize my dream. I regarded Hwasong Yusuk School as a shortcut to joining the anti-Japanese struggle for independence. So I hastily began to make preparations with a light heart for my journey to Huadian. Once a foreign statesman asked me, "Mr. President, how did it happen that you, a communist, went to a military school run by nationalists?" This must seem quite puzzling. It was when I had not yet joined the communist movement that I entered the Hwasong Yusuk School. My world outlook was not at a sufficiently mature stage for me to regard Marxism-Leninism completely as my doctrine. All I had learned about communism at that time was what I had read in Fusang, in such pamphlets as The Fundamentals of Socialism and The Biography of Lenin. I was attracted to a socialist and communist society through the rumors I had heard about the development of the newly born Soviet Union, where the idea of socialism had been realized. There were more nationalists and communists around me. The teachers at the school I attended in various places, there were more nationalists than communists around me. The teachers at the schools I attended in various places advocated nationalist ideas more than communist ones. We were surrounded by nationalism, which, though destined to give way to a new trend of thought, had more than half a century of history, and its influence could not be ignored. The fact that there were many sturdy young people at Hwasong Yusuk School, and that it was giving free political and military education, made me resolve to go to Huadian. Better educational conditions than those at this school were inconceivable for me, who wanted to go to a higher school, although I was in no position to pay any school fees, and harbored the ambition to start on the road of national restoration in accordance with the will of my father. Frankly speaking, in those days, I pinned great hope on the education provided at Hwasong Yusuk School. I was delighted to think that after being taught at the school for 2 years, I would have acquired military knowledge, to say nothing of the fact that I would have received a secondary education. I think he's I'm not sure how old he is exactly. We'd have to get the year. However, when I actually left home, I frequently looked behind me, even as I stepped forward. As I turned back to see Yangdiscum, where my father's remains were buried, and my mother and younger brothers who were far away, watching me out of sight, I could not move my feet easily, because of my distraction. I was worried about my mother, who would have a hard time of it with my little brothers. In those days, it was not easy for a mother to support her family single handedly in such a god-forsaken place as Fusang. I calmed myself by thinking over the words of my mother that a man who started on a journey should not look back. It was about 75 miles from Fusang to Huadian. Rich people made the journey in comfort in a covered carriage called Hanlin, but I could not afford to do so because I had only a little travel money. Huadian was a mountain town under the jurisdiction of Jilin province, situated 12 to 15 miles away from the confluence of the river Songhua and the river Hufa. It was a leading center on the independence movement in South Manchuria. When I started my journey, one fighter for independence in Fusang said that Hwasong Yusik School was in extremely strange circumstances, and he expressed his worry that I would have difficulties. I imagined that the board and lodging of Hwasong Yusik School would be poor because the Independence Army was, as a whole, in financial difficulties. However, such a difficulty was no problem for me. I, who had been living on gruel and had dressed in cotton clothes from my childhood, believed that Hwasong Yusik School could not be poorer than my family in Mangyangdae, however strained the circumstances might be. What made me uneasy was the thought of whether Hwasong Yusik School would receive me, who was young and had no record of military service. However, the fact that Kim Si-u, who was in Huadian, and that my father's friends was at Kang Ji-ha, were working at Hwasong Yusik School was a great reassurance to me. When I go to Huadian, I first visited Kim Si-u's home, as my mother had told me. He was the Huadian area controller under Jung Eun-bi. The Area Control Office was a self-governing organization which helped the Koreans residing in the district under its control in their everyday life. There were such offices in Fusang and Panchi, as well as such localities in Kunduan, Wangkunmin, and Senyangpu. Kim Si-u was a fighter for independence, who had known my father from the time when he was in Jesung County. After the March 1st popular uprising, he went to China and conducted his activities in the area of Linjiang and Dandong. He moved to Huadian in 1924. Having built a rice mill there, he raised money for the independence movement while working hard to enlighten the masses. The rice mill he had built at Yongful Rice Mill, situated in Nanda Street, was while performing his duties as an area controller. He obtained money by operating the rice mill to provide food for the Independence Army and give financial support to the Hwasong Yusik School and the nearby Model Elementary School for Koreans. For my days in Linjiang, I had followed with awe and highly respected him, being fascinated by his open-hearted character, typical of a northern man, and by his strong disposition. He loved me dearly, like his own son. Kim Si-u and his wife, who were mending a hen coop in the yard, received me gladly, shouting for joy as I appeared. There were so many chickens in the yard that they got in my way. Kim Si-u took me to Hwasong Yusik School. He wore clothes that gave off the smell of a rice bran, typical of a rice dealer. Hwasong Yusik School was situated on the banks of the river Hufa. It had steep straw-thatched roof and blackish walls of blue bricks, common in Manchuria. and it stood against a forest of Zelkova trees. The hostel of the Hwasong Yusik School was situated behind the school building, with a playground between them. Both the school building and the hostel were much shabbier than I had imagined, but that did not matter. I suppressed my misgivings by thinking that it would be fine if I could only learn a lot of good things, although the building was shabby. Nevertheless, the school grounds were spacious and tidy. Carefully, I examined the whole appearance of the Hwasong Yusik School with hope and curiosity. I remembered how once, when we were living in Baodaogao, O Tongjin had called on us one cold winter day, not even wearing a fur cap, and consulted my father about the founding of the Hwasong Yusik School. Having arrived at the school as a new student and looked around, I was full of deep emotions. Oh god. Oh god, I just fucked up, chat. God damn it. I clicked the side and fucked up. Now I gotta. Where were we? Why did I have to click the side of the book? Why? Oh no. Okay. Okay, wait. I'm close. God damn it. E-reader problems. There we go. Oh my god. That was scary. The headmaster, a middle-aged shortish man with a receding hairline and a pleasant appearance, received me in his office. He was Isin Ko Tung O. Usin was a disciple of San Peng Hui, the third high priest of Chondoism, and one of the leaders of the March 1st popular uprising, who were known as the 33 People. He graduated from the training school founded by San Peng Hui and then started in the independence movement by building a village school in Yuji, his hometown, and giving an education to the children of believers of Chondoism. He had taken part in the March 1st movement. If anybody wants to type, I'm curious. There you go. There you go, chat. A little background for you in case you don't know what Chondoism is. It's an indigenous religious movement rooted in nationalism and anti-imperialism. He had taken part in the March 1st uprising. Later, he came to China as an exile, and having opened a Chondoist mission, conducted patriotic activities to propagate religion among the exiles. The headmaster said to me that he would repent all his life of his failure to be present at my father's funeral. He and the area controller spoke about my father for a good while. What Ko Tong-o said on that day made a great impression on me. He said, "Songju, you have come to our school at the right time. The independence movement has entered a new era, which requires talented people. The era of Hong Pang Do and Ru Rin Suk, when people worked in a random way, has passed. In order to overcome the tactics and the new types of arm deployed by the Japanese, we need our own modern tactics and new type of arms. Who can solve this problem? It is the new generation, such as you, who should take charge of this and settle it." Unquote. The headmaster also told me a lot which could serve as a lesson for me. He said that the board and lodging were poor, but he urged me to put up with and endure all the difficulties and look forward to the future, the independence of Korea. My first impression of him was that he was gentle, surprisingly eloquent. That day, Kim Soo-woo's family prepared supper for me. As I sat face to face with people belonging to my father's generation at a modest table that expressed the sincerity of the host and hostess, I was full of deep emotion. There was a bottle of alcohol made from cereal at one edge of the round table. I thought that Kim Soo-woo had put it there to drink with his meal, but he poured some into a glass and offered it to me, much to my surprise. I felt so awkward that I flapped my hands. I was bewildered because this was the first time in my life that I had been treated as a grown-up. True, during my father's funeral, Jang Chol-ho had offered me some alcohol when he saw me so upset. However, he had acted so towards a mourner, and no more than that. Nevertheless, Kim Soo-joo treated me as if I were completely grown up. He also changed his style of speech, making it a little more respectful. He said, "At the news of your arrival, I thought eagerly of your father, so I saw a bottle of alcohol was prepared. Whenever your father came to Huadian, I would drink the alcohol I offered him at his table. He would, sorry. Now you take this glass in place of your father. You are now the head of your family." Although he offered me the glass as he said this, I could not bring myself to take it readily. Although the glass was so small that it could be hidden in the palm of one's hand, it was loaded with inestimable weight. At that table, where Kim Soo-woo treated me like an adult, I solemnly felt that I should behave like a grown-up, for the sake of the country and the nation. He offered me the room, which he used as a bedroom and study. He surprised me by saying that he had discussed the matter with the headmaster, and that I should stay at his home without ever thinking of living in the dormitory. He said that because of my father, Kim Hyun-jik, who had requested him to take good care of me in the letter he wrote in his dying moments, he was under obligation to do so. Thus, in Fusong and in Huadian, my father's friends behaved with utmost sincerity towards me. I suppose they did so because they wanted to be loyal to my father. At that time, I thought a great deal about their sincerity and faithfulness. That faithfulness was based on the ardent hope of the people belonging to my father's generation that I would do something for the independence of the country. That hope made me feel a heavy responsibility as a son of Korea, as a member of a new generation. I became fully determined to live up to the expectations of the people by studying and training hard, bearing my father's last injunctions in my mind. From the following day, I started a strange life at Hwasong Yusik School, a military academy. Ko Tong-o took me to a classroom. When they saw me, the students expressed their curiosity about such a young fighter from the Independence Army. They seemed to presume that I was a youngster who had been sent there after running a few errands for one company. There were more than 40 students there, but none of them was as young as me. Most of them were about 20 years of age. Some of them had sparse beards. Some had children. All of them were like elder brothers or uncles to me. 14. He's 14. He's 14 at this time. I just noticed it. As soon as the headmaster had introduced me, the students applauded. I went to the front row by the window and took the seat the teacher had told me to take. The student sitting next to me was Park Jae-suk, from the first company. Whenever a new lesson began, he briefly whispered into my ear, telling me about the teachers as they entered the classroom. The teacher whom he introduced with the greatest respect was military instructor Ri Young. Ri Young was a member of the military commission under Jung Bu, and he had attended Hungpu Military Academy. In those days, everyone looked up to the graduates from his academy, as if they were extraordinary beings. Because his father was running a large chemist shop in Seoul, he was said to take a lot of incense that was sent to him. He was respected by the students because of his wide knowledge and varied attainments, although he tended to be rather bureaucratic. Pak Chae-sok told me that Hwasong Yusik School taught such subjects as the history and geography of Korea, biology, mathematics, physical education, military science, and the history of the World Revolution. He also wrote down the daily routine of the school on a sheet of paper. This is how my ties with Pak Chae-sok was established. Later in the days of the armed struggle, he left an indelible wound in my heart. Although later he was to take the wrong path, in our days at Hwasong Yusik School, he was exceptionally friendly to me, like my own brother. That afternoon, Ko Chang-gol from the 6th Company, accompanied by more than 10 of his comrades, came to Kim Soo-woo's home to visit me. It seemed that their first impression of me had been favorable, and that they were curious and felt an urge to talk to me because I had entered the school at such a young age. Cho Kang-gol had a big scar on his head. His wide forehead and black eyebrows were very manly. He was tall and had good constitution, so he could have been called handsome, but for the scar on his head. There was something free and easy in his way of speaking and in his manner which attracted people. During our first meeting, he made a great impression on me. He said, "You say you were only 14 years old, but you seem very advanced for years. How did you come to serve in the Independence Army at your young age? And how is it that you are attending Hwasong Yusik School?" This was the first thing that Ko Chang-gol asked me. His eyes never left my face, and there was a smile on his lips, all the time, as if he had met an intimate friend with whom he had lived with for a long time under the same roof. Briefly, I told him what he wanted to know. When they learned that I was the eldest son of Kim Hwang-jik, they became more friendly towards me, expressing their surprise. On one hand, the casting respectful glances at me on the other. They asked me many questions in order to learn of my experiences of the country. A little while later, I asked Ko Chang-gol about his time in the Independence Army. First, he told me how he got the scar on his head. He embellished his story to make it more interesting, sometimes cracking jokes, so that it made it really splendid. What I remember in particular about his story was that he always spoke of himself in the third person. When he meant I did so, or I was deceived, he said Cho Kang-gol did so, or Cho Kang-gol was deceived, thus provoking a smile from his listeners. This happened when Ko Chang-gol was a common soldier under Ray Si-bung. Once he captured a spy in the vicinity of Kanyuan. On his way back, he stopped at an inn. But that extremely careless Ko Chang-gol started nodding off, with the spy in front of him. He was tired after walking many miles. Meanwhile, the spy undid the rope that bound him, hit Ko Chang-gol in the head with an axe, and escaped. Fortunately, he did not strike very hard. The decoration on Ko Chang-gol's head had this dismal history. If a man is careless, he will suffer the same fate as Ko Chang-gol. After a few hours of heart-to-heart talks, I found him to be a very interesting man. I made friends with hundreds of thousands of people in my youth. However, this was the first time I had met such a buffoon as Ko Chang-gol, who, referring to himself in the third person all the time, skillfully wove his stories. Afterwards, I learned about his personal history. His father ran a small hotel in Fushan. His father had wanted him to join the business and help him. However, Ko Changol left home and joined the army to help win the country's independence. When he was serving the Independence Army, his grandmother had come to Sun Yat-bu many times in order to persuade her grandson to go home. However, Cho Kang-gol never gave in. Each time she came, he said, "With the country's ruined, it is not the time to keep our hotel." I became friendly with Cho Kang-gol, Kim Rik-gap, Ki Wang-chun, Ri Ji-u, Pak Kun-won, Kang Pyung-sun, and Kim Won-yu. In addition to them, I got to know many people who came to Hwasong Yusik School from South Manchuria and various parts of our country, determined to join the anti-Japanese movement. Every afternoon, they called at Kim Su-u's to talk with me. I was grateful for the fact that so many of my fellow students visited me. Yet I was surprised at this. I became acquainted from the start with people who were 5 to 10 years older than me, and not with those of my own age. This is why many of my comrades in arms in these days, when I was working among young students, and in the period of my underground revolutionary activities, were older than me. Within a few days of starting at the Hwasong Yusik School, I discovered that the circumstances there had been more strained than the fighter for independence in Fusong had told me. What could be called the property of Hwasong Yusik School was only some old desks and chairs, and a few items of sport equipment. But I had a great ambition. Although the house was gray, shabby, and cramped for space, what reliable young people were growing up in that straw-thatched house. Hwasong Yusik School was short of funds, but it had many sturdy young people. In this sense, it could be called wealthy. This gladdened me above all else.